fun.
We're
That's
driving by when they were handing them out, so we figured it's time to try this.
Yep. Make sure you have a lot of space.
800 pounds, here you come.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's gonna take
exactly.
a lot of water and a lot of
There's quite
fertilizer.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of techniques. I think we're going to be, we'll be successful if we could just keep it watered.
Work there,
Yeah.
meeting here. Hi. Oh, sorry, Jason, were you saying something?
Well, I was gonna say to August, make sure you grow it on a pallet.
Oh.
Grow the
Oh, yeah.
pumpkin itself right on a
Mm.
pallet. Put a piece of
Idea.
canvas down. So
Yeah.
when they come to get it, they just pick it up and go.
I've always wondered how that works. Makes sense. Plan ahead. Yeah, exactly. So I will, once we get some fruit, hopefully. Look at a pallet.
Just, are we waiting for Josh or is my yeah, waiting for Josh. We could get started.
I did play outside.
So Lindsay, I think you're going to turn it over to Stephanie. Is that correct?
Oh, okay.
Jesse, I'm going to turn it to Jesse.
Okay.
And you're streaming on YouTube, so you should be ready to go.
Okay,
Thanks,
thanks, Lindsay. I'm gonna mute you, August, just because there's a lot of there's a lot of family sounds, which are good family sounds, but
Better than crying. I heard that before.
so hey everybody. Welcome to a workshop that seems to be actually happening, which is great. Thank you, Lindsay, for setting us up. So the workshop, the topic I think is loosely like board operations. We wanted to talk about the annual calendar, the various things that we need to plan for throughout the year. We have some newer members, me included, actually. I've never reviewed this before. So I think we would like to plan for getting some of these things done before Josh moves on. I think he's the only board member with an expiring term.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I think some aspects are sort of self-assessment and taking stock of how the year has gone and then planning for the next year. So we'd like Josh to be part of that. As someone with tenure and experience and knowing how all this works, I asked Stephanie to sort of take point on this workshop. But informal, we can all ask questions. But yeah, if I could pass it to you, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think I'm acting as board historian because I'm just going to tell you the
That
way
works.
things were or have been, whether right, wrong, or indifferent. But I guess I'll start off with the calendar and just answer any questions about that. Our board calendar, well, as you know, our terms run June to June. So, and it's kind of a, kind of a soft start. What happens is new board members get voted on by their towns in June. And then usually it's at the town meeting that you get sworn in, and that's where the baton gets passed. So depending on, we've had years where it's the new board member who's at the June meeting and years where it's the old board member. But I think from now on, I think it's going to be the old board member stays until June. Just the way the calendar is now been put. That's June. I'm just going to go through month to month and highlight, what we've done in the past and what is a normal procedure. July is usually off, the month off. Of course, last year, I think we had 2 or 3 board meetings with the pandemic. But normally that's an off month. And August is usually our first board as a new board meeting. And I can write all this down too. I probably should have done it for Craig when he arrived. We usually do a facilities tour in August, usually before the meeting, and we get a walk around and the highlights of what's been done over the summer, what we need to think about during the year, goals, stuff like that. So that usually happens in August. And then at our first meeting, we have an organizational meeting. And that's when we elect officers and we decide on committee assignments. That's August. And I think in September is more the time that we have talked about, like, what are our goals for the year. And a lot of that has been done behind the scenes between superintendent and principal and board chair. But I think it's a great thing to do as a whole board. The next item of note in the calendar is December is the AOS budget vote. Now, this board doesn't vote on it, but that's when the AOS budget is decided and voted on. The board actually votes on it in November, and then the public vote is in December. And that's important because that does affect our budgets, which we don't start until February. And that's always come up as a, like, how can we change this? Well, it's too late to change it in February. If we have any issues with the AOS budget, it has to come up in that November timeframe. Okay, I think most of us know that in February the finance committee starts working on the budget. Principal and finance manager, AOS finance manager, usually start working on it maybe even in December and January. Kim, am I right? That work starts. But the first,
Stephanie.
yes, and the finance committee sees it is usually February, and the board may see that first in March. There's usually a workshop. As we did this year, we passed the budget in April. Then at the May meeting, we have the public vote on the budget. And in June, there's the validation vote. And just to give you a little history on that, we did have on the ballot one year, we tried to do away with the validation vote. There are some towns that don't require a validation vote, that they just require the public vote. But our towns, that never has passed. So we do the town vote in person where whoever's interested comes and votes on the GSB budget. And then we do a validation vote. And that's usually a ballot vote. So, I mean, that's something the board could consider, trying to put that on the ballot again to get rid of the validation vote. In a way, it's a nice way for the whole public to get involved with that. So that's May and June. We only, as a board, have done a self-evaluation once. It was intended for June, but it ended up happening in August of 2019. And then, of course, 2020 was 2020. It didn't happen. But we thought that was a good thing to start and to think about. So that is, and I think that's a good thing to do this year in June, if we can pull it off. In 2019, when we did it, we just actually took I think we took it from, and I have that, I think I gave it to you, Jesse, just the survey from Oregon State and it had just different categories, and it's just very helpful. And we just had every board member, fill it out and make comments, and we just discussed it. We did not formalize it more than that. It was our first time doing it, and that's the way we felt. It was a good way to do it. It was casual, and we did come out with a few goals for the board. And I think that would be very worthwhile, especially now that we have a new board. And we could set goals at that time, not only for the board, but for the school. Many years we've talked about having a July sort of workshop for the board that would just be an annual kind of picnic maybe, and we talk about strategic planning, and that has never flown. And people are just too busy in the summer, and we've just never done it. But it's always been an intention, and that's it for the calendar. Any questions on that? Did I cover everything? Yeah. So I guess that's a starting point for, maybe we should talk about the board self-evaluation. Is that where you want to go, Jesse?
Yeah, I think we can just openly discuss. As you ran through the year, I had a few things.
Okay.
That's
Questions?
certainly one. No more suggestions. Does anybody have any questions to start off, just to clarify anything? I mean, you think that was great. Seems pretty straightforward.
Okay.
The only thing that I would throw in there is, and thank you, Stephanie, is that you meet monthly, third Wednesday, and have policy, finance, and facilities.
Mhm.
So are you saying second Wednesday, Kim? I think it's third, isn't it? Second Wednesday? Okay, second Wednesday. And then you have the three subcommittees that go in. So when we put a calendar together, we'll put all of those with their dates as well.
And that's right. The calendar for the board is usually set in August. And it doesn't change for, basically it hasn't changed for the school board, but sometimes for the AOS can have a different calendar, but those are done in that August timeframe.
And that's the same time you do officers and committees. And yeah, it seems like that would be maybe a target for writing all this down. Yeah, like this seems like a good thing to sort of put into a document. And I know we've all talked about like board norms to sort of accompany the handbook and to accompany the role. I think that would be really good too. Maybe we can target that for August. Not you, August, the month August. Every time I say the month August, I'm like, not. So it sounds like the thing that's coming up the soonest that I wish that we had planned for a little more is the board assessment. Just given that sometimes board members are leaving, and I think that sounds like it would be a workshop thing to me. We do have business meetings the second Wednesdays. I think we have established a fourth Wednesday workshop, which I'm finding this really useful. I think as a board, I'd like to talk about like whether or not we think that's useful. That might be something we talk about when we set the calendar. So again, in that August meeting. And I think with Josh departing at some point, I think we can maybe do an exit interview with him. He can brain dump what he thinks, and we can bring that and represent him at that meeting. Because I think the new board member to replace him that'll all happen at the same time with the budget validation vote, right? That's all in the same ballot. Okay. So yeah, I think all the other things I think I would just bring to that August meeting. I think just the idea of maybe moving things around slightly, or putting, like moving the board self-assessment a little earlier. does everybody agree with that? Like, I feel like the existing board, as it has been for the previous year, should do the assessment, and then the new board should do the planning.
Agreed.
Yeah, that
Agreed.
makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Okay. And then I guess the other part, unless anybody has anything to bring up around that, like, is just around the AOS budget. Stephanie can attest that I asked a lot of questions during that cycle. Like, I was just like, how do we fit in? How do we plug in? How do we get, and I think it was challenging to know where the right place for us as a board to get together and to look at what they were planning at the AOS level. Even just to assess where it was before a board vote was challenging. But it sounds like it would have to be in that October, November timeframe, like October, really.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the first time the AOS sees the budget would be in the October meeting. And again, there's not much wiggle room on that budget because it's really is the cost of administration and then how it's divided up among the towns and the schools based on the population. So that's where it varies, and that's a big calculus equation that I think
That's a
Lindsay could
good point.
show us what it means.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good point too. That's a very automatic budget, right? That budget is there's not a lot of wiggle room. So
No,
it's not, and I think that's why this isn't really a flaw at all, that there's not much input that we'd have as the GSB board to it. It just is what it is. So I think as long as we're like in the loop and we have access to it and we can facilitate that planning, which starts in December, I think we're fine.
right. And I think, there were a few issues that we, some changes that we have made previously, one was around the tech coordinator. We have, we figured out a new way to share some extra time of KJs between the board, between all the schools. We've talked about a facilities manager at times. We've talked about an AOS level person. Last year, we were talking about a special ed assistant. So there are some positions that we may need to change or expand, but it would be good to bring it to the board, and I guess that would be done at the AOS, when we have our AOS report.
And I think, Jesse, as you bring up the, if you will, the confusion, some of the density of the AOS, I think it's worthwhile to have that conversation with the AOS, with the local boards, because when we got into discussions around vocational education and then some also related to Lincoln Academy, it became very clear that members needed to discuss what is local and what is AOS, what is the town, the secondary, and it's very clear that we have moved away from that sense that it is, and that there's very much that the AOS board does other than the AOS budget. There's really not much policy. We had a few changes this year when Rick left and we hired Lindsay, and then when Sue left and we hired Kelly as the special ed director. But it was a matter of where are those decisions made, and so there was some discussion there, and they relate to the budget, but it's also that sense that vocational education agreements with Lincoln, they happen at the local level, not at the AOS level, even though it's some rich conversations.
Mhm.
Yeah, that took some processing, I think, for us to all get there.
It's continual, and it's whether it's trite or not. It's kind of like peeling back the layers of the onion and looking at the local agreement and looking at the understandings of just the various nature of our school committees and school boards, the locals, the consolidated, the secondary. It takes a diagram, I think.
Okay, I muted myself instead of unmuting myself. But I do want to say, just talking about the AOS, is that there really are two functions, major functions of the AOS board, and that is to hire the superintendent and evaluate the superintendent. And the second one is to approve a budget. The AOS Interlocal Agreement, I think, would be probably a good workshop for this board
Mhm.
to look at. This past year, the AOS did a lot of work on that. Obviously, I know we brought it up a number of times, and just trying to clarify that, like, what the AOS is and what it isn't. And again, a couple of policies that what's kind of lacking at the AOS level. But not many, there aren't really many policies because it's really just an administrative function. So that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah,
And
I
and
think,
I'm happy to walk through that interlocal agreement whenever anyone's ready. We have spent a lot of time. We got sidetracked, I think, with COVID. We got and not able to meet to vote on it in person. So it's still out there now. It only makes sense, and I may have mentioned this to you, but to hold on to it until we get the new local, so when we get the new national census data, and we can plug that in, then we don't need to go back and modify it again. But it doesn't change the language, but there are still some things that I think some members from some of the locals still want to take a look at. They're small things, but I think the majority of the work is done. But we should walk through it.
yeah, we have that on that's the short list of the upcoming workshops.
Okay,
I thought
good.
that would be good after the new board, like maybe September, October, it
Yep.
depends. Like, we do have a little lull there where we come back together and then we sort of have a couple of months before budget season starts up again. So
Yeah, I'm happy to do that whenever you're ready. I think that's a great idea.
I think that'd be good. Yeah, I mean, just to iterate something I've said before, I don't think that there are any flaws here. I think it's just a matter of putting it in writing, of, the current board, whenever that happens, kind of agreeing to all of this and just saying, yeah, this looks good. Definitely will help new board members and new chairs to get a lay of the land, if there's a calendar that makes that obvious. But cool. Does anybody have any other questions, like high level? I think we could talk a little bit about the board assessment part, Stephanie.
Before you go there, Jesse, one of the things that we've tried to do, and it always kind of feels disjointed with the calendar, and as Stephanie explained it in terms of local elections, is we've tried to do a board workshop with MSMA or MSSA for new members. I've reached out to them. We tried to schedule it in June, but it doesn't make sense because you don't have your Newcastle members yet. So we should plug that in for August, early September, and have Eileen or Steve come and talk to us about, just walking through the board responsibilities, board's actions as a collective rather than individuals, all of those things.
I wonder if that's good for July ahead of the August meeting. That way, new members will hit that organizational meeting, kind of knowing a little more of what the ins and outs of the role are.
We'll see if she's available. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Really, any time ahead of the August meeting would be fine,
Okay.
I think. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So I think the rest of my notes come for August. Are there any other gaps? Is anybody thinking? I mean, obviously it's not a one-off thing, like send an email or we'll talk about it again. Like, really anything before August, before we, set the calendar. So think about, like maybe any other gaps or any other things that we think we should do. I love the idea of an offsite. Like on other boards that I've been part of. That's been pretty cool. Not only like a team building thing, but really just that's the goal of the workshops too, is to be out of a business meeting and just be able to like share ideas. That happens, in an offsite as well. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts about that. I know we get busy in the summers. Could do an offsite in the mid-year. In the winter. Sam's thinking.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, Jesse, it might be good to target late fall, early winter when people are a little bit less likely to be off gallivanting in the wide outdoors. But I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think it's an important kind of team building exercise to have those kind of offsites as well. So I would encourage us to consider that.
I like that time of year too, because I think, again, your new board members, like we're talking about basically being inclusive and saying, okay, you've just arrived, we want you to be part of this. That's kind of a lot to take on. And, maybe late fall, early winter, they've got a few months under their belts and they have a better idea of, what they're doing. I definitely did not know which way was up for a few months the first time I was on a board, so I still actually don't, if you all probably could tell, but I like that. Okay, I updated my note. Kim, can you think of anything where like years have gone by and you've been like, oh, we should have planned this earlier, or well, we should have a point in time every year where we do X?
Well, I think one of the things that I wonder about, with the calendar is getting some guidance from the board of, what type of educational presentation. So, each month, in the past, Stephanie, going through the history, we used to in the past have more educational presentations. With COVID and all of that, it did make it difficult, but, trying to see if the board is wanting to, make that more consistent, that, for 10, 15 minutes every month, there's an educational presentation.
I wonder if that's part of the board norms work to decide as a board what we feel like the structure of our regular business meeting is. Because I for one, I like that too. I'm sure everybody does. Like to have context for, especially long-term projects, things that have budgetary impact. I know a good example is the sort of the greenhouse and the curriculum plan that goes with it and what the plans are on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. So I know that that's been something we've talked about doing, and we haven't had time. And I think we should start thinking about how to make time for that and have it become a normal thing. It seems like it would be an optional thing, right? Like not every month you would have something that was, but if we had sort of established that, for any time that is appropriate where we're working on longer term things, especially if they have budgetary impact, we should have that. And then also sometimes it's just great to see a teacher come and show some stuff that's going on. Like, I think that's really useful for the board. That's great. Yeah, I'll put that on the list.
I would agree with that. It's really helped me to be in touch with new teachers and with the behavior program and all of the things you've brought forward. I mean, it's one thing to hear about it through the principal's report, but it's another thing to really see the work by the teachers. So I think it's a monthly thing that I would love to see, because there's plenty of topics out there that we could become educated about to make us more in tune with the school.
Even one of the ones I enjoyed most was when Sherry formed the girls group and brought them in. They were so ready to present and share and identify as a group. It was just fun to watch them.
And I go back to when we had Jen Wright present, and it was out of that presentation that Stephanie, you nominated her for Teacher of the Year, and she became Lincoln County Teacher of the Year. So I mean, it's really good to showcase what's going on. And I know teachers, you know, are interested in doing that, but, you know, making sure that, you know, when we say, okay, I'd like to set you up, that, you know, there is the time for it, because sometimes time does get crunched. But I think it's very valuable. And especially if the board does continue with recording board meetings on YouTube, I think there's another level of value to the educational presentations, because again, in years past when there was just in-person meetings, oftentimes there wasn't many people there. But again, if these presentations are part of a recorded YouTube board meeting that others can watch at another time, it does give an opportunity to highlight and showcase and educate what's going on in the building.
Mhm. I put that just to say it. I put that on my list for August too, around norms and meeting structure, whether or not we should keep Zooming. Like once we're back in person, maybe we just keep Zooming. Lincoln Academy has seen this too at their parent meetings, whatever they're called, LAPA, I think, where they, you know, they might have 12 or 15 and they have sometimes 60 on Zoom. And it's not necessarily just a pandemic thing. You know, you're home and you're cooking dinner and you got kids with homework and you could just turn it on and it lets people connect. So, and then I think it's a no-brainer to have from there the YouTube videos for anybody to see anytime. I think it's great.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that the admin team has been talking about that, and we all agree. It's good to get back together, but then you also have access at any time. You have a different record. You've got more transparency, more participation. And then for me, it's those snow nights when we may not want to have a board meeting, but we do a Zoom school board meeting rather than reschedule, because rescheduling is hard for everyone. It's great that night, but we pay for it down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Just different options.
Yeah. We'll put that on the list for discussion for sure. Great. Wow. I got a whole lot of notes now. That's good. And yeah, I got, you know, keep stuff coming, keep ideas coming. And also just this, I guess the context is several months off at this point, but August, we should really sit down and just crank all this out, put it in writing. Did you, Stephanie, did you say July is typically goals and planning, or we should do goals and it's not goals and planning?
No, July is usually off.
Oh, I thought June. Okay, June is,
I
what's
mean,
June then?
we
June
have our
is-
meeting in
okay.
June. June is also the vote, the town votes, at least Newcastle.
Yeah, no,
I think Wayman
for
too,
sure.
right?
Yeah. Where do goals and planning come in then?
Typically they've come in August or September, but that has typically been between the superintendent, the principal, and the board chair kind of, let's talk about that. And it hasn't been so much a board discussion. And the same thing about the educational presentations. It's usually either Kim has an idea or a teacher comes to Kim and says, I'd like to present this, or the board, you know, it comes in different ways. The board will say, well, you know, we really want to learn more about gifted and talented, or what's happening in the library, or whatever.
You know what I might like to propose? This is just an idea, so we don't have to decide on it. It might be nice to get staff input on what they'd like to see, and then come up through admin and through the superintendent and land with us, and we have all that we'd like to see, and then we kind of work through that as a body. I bet we could get some themes. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if we asked all the staff and the same 3 ideas sort of run common. That might be a nice thing to try and organize. And then, you know, kind of to work through that, I think definitely it should not be I think, and Craig, you might have thoughts on this. It feels like this could be the start of that process, or part of that process of, you know, the board chair and the business manager and the superintendent and the principal sort of all talking about this stuff and then bringing it to the board to workshop on.
I think it equalizes the input. It doesn't have us selecting what we think is important, but it allows people who are excited about something, or even some of the newer programs that might have come along, or staff changes. I know that when, I believe, Kim, remind me, we had Holly come in as the BCBA because that was something that we were interested in, and that was helpful. So yeah, I think that reaching out, just find those who are interested rather than drafting those who are reluctant would be probably more beneficial. It also shows respect for staff, I think, by asking them.
Mhm. Yeah, that's sort of a two-way thing.
Yep.
But definitely, you know, there's nobody knows, so nobody knows what's going on better than the staff, right? And I'm sure that there's got to be some common ideas on where we can improve things, or things that we're not even thinking about. I think that's one of the things that we have to really communicate, maybe in our norms or somewhere, that we're all just people and very few of us are educators. I mean, I know a few are, but that's not, you know, a requirement. You could very easily have a board where no, you know, there's no educational experience at all. And I think that's okay, because the job is largely, you know, it's oversight, it's governance. But the policies that come into play, that we put in place, they can be really creative, and they can drive positive student outcomes, and they can, yeah, I think we can do a lot with that type of input. Cool. Any other ideas or questions or observations, or just generally like the annual activities? Do you want to talk? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
You know, I just, this is probably a bigger topic, but strategic planning has come up again and again and again and again. And we spent a lot of time with Steve Bailey, Kim and I did, putting together a plan on how to do the strategic plan. And then it just, I mean, it just seems like it's, you know, it's such a huge thing that it never happens. So I don't know if that's why, like, personally, I always had, okay, goals, and then the superintendent and principal can talk about some goals for the year. But there must be a way to do this, that it's not such an overwhelming task every year. I mean, not that, but you know what I mean?
No, there is a way to do this differently, I think, and it's picking up the threads that we have been laying down. I think it's time now to actually plan something, and it's not short-term work. And I think that's the first thing. And it's, I mean, I think we're still on topic, because this is something I think that we need to do in August. So we have officers and committees.
Mhm.
I think we need a strategic planning committee. We need a standing committee on the board to drive strategic planning. And I have a proposal that I think I will bring to that meeting that includes, you know, it's a subcommittee of the board, but I think it needs some additional members for that central committee, some staff, some community, some central office administration. And then I believe that the most effective way I've seen this work is for a committee like that, a smaller committee, to start with an existing document, which we do have. It's outdated, it's older. And to reach out to some more recent plans that have been done at other schools. Very similar to how we did the return to school plan. Say we have, you know, we use reference materials, right? We say, we like the way this plan looks, we like the way that plan looks. We can abstract it, can break it down into sections, and then we can have subcommittees or working groups, depending on which format we want to use, go off and do that work. So a strategic plan, as you all know, has a lot of components. There's a lot of data gathering that has to happen. There's a lot of, there's municipal data you have to pull in. There's public health data. There's, we would have to talk to all of the towns that are in the CSD, Newcastle and Bremen and Damascata, and talk to their kind of local governments and talk about what their planning looks like and what they're expecting to see in the next 5 to 10 years and how the school will best support that. I think a small central committee needs to do that and then divvy out the actual boots on the ground work. I think it's pretty long term, but that's my idea. I think that might be something that we plan through the next year. As committee work, really. Because ideally then you have a strategic plan that everybody's behind and it's been put together by the community, by the staff, by administration, by the board. The towns are in the loop, and you have then something to socialize, and then we'll probably have a couple public forums along the way, hear what people want out of their schools. With people have great ideas. I mean, sometimes the greatest ideas come from one person just showing up to a podium for 5 minutes. And then they go away, and then we work for 6 months on it, right? So that's my kind of loose thoughts. And I've shared this with Stephanie before, but that's what's been rattling around my head for a couple of months. So I think that's the way we tackle this. And I think that we can plan that out in August. Thoughts? Some nodding.
I think that sounds good, Jesse. I mean, in my professional life, just coming out the other end of a strategic planning process, which was truncated and abbreviated, there are efficiencies that can be had and ways to do it that aren't as onerous as some may think. So I think that's definitely worth discussing and putting into action some strategies around doing that in the August timeframe.
Well, we'll put it on the list. Yeah, and I think what's interesting specifically for sharing is I think the policy work can align with those initial goals. Sometimes that's a really great way of seeing what we're missing. We have so many different things to support. I see policy as primarily supporting administration in support of staff, in support of student outcomes. That's sort of like this nested thing. So I think when you look at something top down, but you have to get into the details, I think you can see where the gaps are. So my guess is that work will feed more policy work, and we'll just be real busy. Good busy, I think. Okay, great. I'm feeling like we have a lot of good ideas here. Did you want to talk, or is anybody interested in talking a little bit about the board self-assessment? Or just other than it being a good idea and we need to do it?
Yep.
Just on that front real fast, Jesse, I'd be interested. I know, Stephanie, you mentioned that there was a model that you picked and decided to utilize, and I'd just be interested in kind of taking a look at that and understanding what other boards utilize elsewhere to figure out how to construct the most effective and useful assessment for our situation.
I can send that out. I think I sent it to you, Jesse, but I can send that out after this meeting,
Yeah.
just for everyone to see what it was. But we did a lot of research looking, and we did not see very many school boards doing self-assessment. There were a lot of other boards that did self-assessment, but it wasn't based on schools. So this one just seemed like it was loose enough. We can comprehend what it was trying to say. I'll send it out, and anyone who wants, who can find something, that would be great.
Great.
But it was from Oregon. Okay.
It looked good to me when I skimmed through it. Yeah, definitely. Please send it out. And yeah, I think it would be really useful, really helpful, especially ahead of planning. It's really, I mean, because I think there's a difference between calendar, like adhering, sticking to the calendar, and then planning. And I think that's the part that's really hard to suss out, to figure out how to do. So anything that, any structure that can help us do that, I think would be great. Can also just have like, did we do good? Yes, no, maybe. I went to a Newcastle town meeting, and those town officers really have a lot of fun in their meetings. So I was trying to I'm trying to liven it up a little. See, they laugh. I swear they laughed for like 8 minutes straight. I'm good with that. There's a ton of notes here. I'll pull them all together.
I have some notes too, Jesse, that I'll pull together. So.
Cool, great. I feel like we got through that a lot less difficult, with a lot less difficulty than I anticipated. I thought we'd be like debating about like whether or not we need to do things. It seems like a lot of people are just nodding, like this seems good.
You set us up for success, Jesse, and make this really easy. And Stephanie's background was very digestible, so.
I think that was Steph. I think that was all Stephanie. Actually, so for the board members that have been on the board a little longer, speaking of committees, like it's difficult. We found it's difficult to spin up a committee. So we spun up CPT really easily, and I think that it was pretty instrumental early on. And then now it's not meeting because I don't know, Kim, if you would disagree. There's not a lot for us to do. We're just basically like things are coming up one at a time, and the board can just take it on. But so I found that like a temporary committee was pretty easy to spin up and put into action. I feel like it would be difficult to put many more standing committees in place. Knowing that central office doesn't have to be involved with all of them, right? And that's an important thing, because there's 5 schools, 5 boards, 20 committees, like that's pretty impossible. But just for our own calendars and trying to fit it in, do you think anybody who's been on the board like a year or more, do you think that we're missing a functional committee? We talked about having a curriculum committee, a technology committee, these things. Do you think anything's missing that we should be discussing?
I think it'd be a danger to spread ourselves too thinly, because like, first of all, policy is a pretty substantial committee, and there's a lot of facility work that's being done right now too. And the budget is ongoing. I mean, we're always watching the budget. So all 3 of those committees are fairly demanding. And to add anything else, I think you have a limited size of our school board. So you would, besides having the workshop, having the regular meeting, I think it would just spread us too thinly.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those topics dealt with also, like technology is being dealt with in policy. So that can be discussed more in depth once those policies come to the board.
I do have to echo that with what Sharon just said, is that, and I'm really thrilled to see that this board is really engaged. And we have, it hasn't always been the case. In fact, I believe that when I got on the board, we only had committees for 1 year. There used to not be committees. And there was a board chair, I think maybe 2 years before I got on there, that says, what do you mean you don't have a finance committee? What do you mean you don't have, and the set up committees, because I don't know how that work was getting done. So I think our 3 standing committees are really important. And I'm really just thrilled to see that everybody on this board is really very much engaged, and more engaged than, some past, historically. I think a lot of people were just coming to 1 meeting a month, or that's all their work allowed them to do. So I think we need to just appreciate that we're doing all this work and not push us too much.
That makes sense.
So.
I think you touched on one of the points I always return to in thinking about this. Yeah, we're only 7 people.
Mhm.
So, you know, Sam and I have been talking about like other boards and how they work and how, you know, you can't really have a board chair that to go to all the committee meetings and run all the meetings and meet with the superintendent. It's just too much. So we're kind of thinking about how to organize that a little better to streamline it, right? To make sure, because I'm kind of dropping balls left and right. My job got so busy. We want to stop that. But the flip side of that coin is I think you just nailed it, Stephanie. When there weren't any committees, you wondered how were they doing the work? Committees don't invite more work, right? A well-structured or well-intended committee where the board feels we need this committee, it means the work already exists, we're just not doing it.
Mhm.
So that's the thing that I worry about. That's why I think we absolutely need to add at least one more. And I will stand at a podium and passionately fight for a comprehensive planning board committee because I think it's absolutely necessary. It will be more work, but it's work that we need to do. So I wonder if we put a pin in the idea that like we probably just don't have the time for it, are we missing other work?
Mhm.
Are there things that we could do? I agree on technology. I think that between, you know, the technology coordinator we have and sort of just the turns the technology's taken in the last 10 or 20 years, it really is policy work that's missing. So I think I agree with that, but like, are there other spaces where we're not hitting things?
Mhm.
Maybe there aren't. Like maybe this is what we need to be doing.
I mean, curriculum has come up a couple of times, so that I think that we talked about maybe the CPT committee morphing into that. And just regarding committees, it is good to get other people besides board members on those committees. And Kim, you will remember we did a pre-K. We just did an ad hoc pre-K committee, and I don't know, we met maybe 6 times, and I think I was the only board member on there, and it was Kim, and then a bunch of teachers, and that was really a productive committee. And it was, it didn't stress the board to have that. It was more like they were gathering information and just putting together ideas. And so I think if we structure committees like, you know, additional committees besides our standing committees, if we structure those committees where we do have outside participation. People have
Yeah, I think-
energy
we
and
do-
expertise. So
Yeah, I mean, if you look at policy, Sharon, what do we have? We have two staff plus 2 administration,
Mhm.
and then 2 or 3,
Yeah.
or maybe 2 board
And
members. So,
2 boards.
yep.
Yeah, and then
facility.
KJ at the last one and so, but I agree with the ad hoc. I think there are times, and the pre-K was a really good example of that. Things will come up where we need to do more research and present information at the board.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the purpose of the CPT too, is to support administration. So you
I
basically
guess I've
can't-
heard
we
of-
didn't- Oh, I think you're lagging there, Sharon. Is Sharon's network lagging for everybody else, or is it just me?
yes,
Okay,
I think she's
so
frozen.
Sharon, if I talked over you, that was inadvertent. It was just Zoom. I think we might be about to lose Sharon.
My internet isn't working too well for some reason. I think I'm going in and out.
Yeah, so I was just apologizing for talking over you. But yeah, the CPT was like that. Like we just decided we needed that, and we put it in place. So it's more the sort of the work that we know will exist. Like we know we need policy, we know we need finance, we know we need facilities. Those didn't exist some number of years ago. And right now we can't imagine doing the work of the board without them. So maybe just everybody could think a little bit about like if we're missing anything else. Maybe we're not. I mean, curriculum, we have a curriculum coordinator or director, right, in central office that all the schools share. Maybe we don't need a committee there. I mean, it's more of a thought experiment to think about. There's also, I do think we should think about structuring them a little differently. You know, for facilities, does facilities need 2, 3 board members on it, or could it be 1 or 2? You know, if you took the existing committees, I think finance is really good to have multiple heads because it's such a small committee. It's effectively superintendent, business manager, principal, and then your 3 board members. But facilities feels like one that you could have, like, basically the chair could be the person on it because a lot of the work is done by staff, right? Jason?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely true. I mean, we hear the reports out what's going on and try to plan out what we need to do for the next time. So it doesn't really need, multiple people, really.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's something to think about. We could maybe staff them thinner and then have more if we feel like we need more. I definitely have.
Sorry, Jesse, but today's facilities meeting was expedient. I mean, it was 20 minutes. We did what we needed to do and we left. And I think that's a part of the norm also. It was great the way Jason ran it. Mark was there, Kim was there, got through what we needed to do and we were done. It felt productive.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's, at least in my mind's eye, I'm really excited to talk about this in more depth, but I think that the strategic planning committee, I think that's what's in my mind's eye is, you've got maybe somebody from a select board, maybe a librarian and a couple of parents and a police officer and a doctor, and just like sort of that's most of your committee. And then you've got maybe 1 or 2 board members, right? But the idea is to facilitate, that work and communicate it into the board. And if the board has any action to take, then it takes it. But often it doesn't. We're going to go create a strategic plan. That's not going to need to be on the monthly business agenda, like month over month over month. That's really like somebody go off and build that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge burden. And I think that's a great opportunity to involve the community too. So anyway, something to think about. To see, I mean, we might be good. We might be good with with the 4, right? Certainly not trying to find more work. Like I said, that it's the work we're not doing is what what we might not be doing is what kind of has me a little worried. Well, cool. Are you muted again, Stephanie? You are. You said something.
I'm just saying, I'm just mumbling to myself. Yes, I think it's good.
Yeah, it's really good when you mumble though. Well, I don't have anything else for tonight. I think that was really great. At least for me, I got a bunch of notes. Does anybody have anything else or observations?
Good conversation, Jesse. Really appreciate it from all of you. And from my point of view, I don't think you're missing anything. I think we're on top, and individual one-offs come up, but it's not committee work necessarily, but it can fall to a group or fall to the board. But I think that it's a remarkable board working really efficiently, effectively.
Well, thanks. That's nice to hear. Good job, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we could be 1 hour and done. That sound okay to everybody?
Sounds great.
Sounds good to me.
Keep up the efficiencies.
Okay, have a
Well,
nice
then,
evening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all. Okay, good night.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, good night.